And he began to minister to me. He began to tell me that whatever I'm carrying, that I don't have to carry, that there's a Jesus that can heal a marriage, that can touch a life, and that could change. And I'm just kind of lit, and my eyes well up because for the first time I hear hope. And I just kind of look down and it's like a tear rolls down my cheek. And he's like, you need God, bro. You need God, man. And so I just kind of like nod, yeah. And he saw that I was tender. And he goes, you know what? I know a church, really, really good church. A lot of young folks, a lot of young Navy folks go to that church.
Welcome to the free sermon podcast of the Potter's House Church in Virginia Beach, affiliated with Christian Fellowship Ministries. Our vision is winning souls, making disciples, and planting churches. It's Tuesday, where you're going to hear a powerful testimony of God's grace revealed in human lives. Each Tuesday, you'll hear Pastor Adam interviewing pastors from around the world to share the mighty miracles that God has done in their lives to give you hope for yours. We share the stories of the men behind the messages you hear every other day on this podcast. Keep in mind that the free version only includes a portion of the whole testimony interview. To listen to the full version, use the links in the show notes to subscribe via Apple Podcasts or supercast.tech. Every dollar goes to supporting world evangelism. Enjoy today's Testimony Tuesday.
All right. Welcome back to the Testimony Tuesday here on the VBPH Sermon Podcast. Pastor Adam here with you again. You might notice that my background looks a little different today. Well, because we got something crazy going on today. So we have an in-person interview, believe it or not, all the way from Norfolk, Virginia, right down the road here. And we want to welcome into the show Pastor Ernie Peña.
Oh man, that sounds so weird.
Is it the first time somebody said that?
It's not, but it sounds weird coming from another pastor, bro. Like,
well, hey, Ernie, thank you so much for joining us and making the time
yes.
on this Monday evening. We appreciate you making the time for us.
Oh, I appreciate the invite. It's an honor, man.
Well, you are not a novice to this podcasting thing. For our listeners to know, you got your own podcast that you do over there with Keeping the Balance and Brother Red.
Yeah.
So, well, before we get into the meat of the testimony, I was curious, and for the sake of our audience, maybe you can share people about what your podcast is and what you guys are doing, and give yourself a little shout out there.
Okay, yeah. Well, I appreciate that. That's awesome, man. I wasn't, I didn't picture that, but that's pretty cool.
Hey, this is a podcast audience.
Yeah, I know, right?
So people want to know about that.
Oh well, so you know what? This that podcast is Keeping the Balance, and we came up with the acronym KTB, and we began to do it because it was just having conversations with other men. And at that time I had a house that had a detached garage. And so all the guys would go there. The ladies obviously would hang out in the kitchen and, do what ladies do, right? And chop it up and have fun. And then the guys would just sit down and we would have coffee. And then we would just have some really, really genuine conversations. And then one of the brothers said, man, imagine, like, could somebody get something off of this if they heard what we were talking about, where and it's something that I've heard before, where it's maybe in one of the conferences early my salvation. I remember hearing Pastor Paul Stevens get up there and say, we're having coffee at a shop and just having a conversation. And then someone heard us and said, hey, I just want to say that I've been listening to what you guys have been saying. And you know what? I'm glad that there are people that think like that. It made me think of things different. And I remember hearing that. And so when he said that, I said, man, it wouldn't be a bad idea. Why not? What would we call it? What would be our target audience? What are we going? And so the first time that we did it with a little snow globe, or not a snow globe, but
the blue microphone.
The blue microphone, and it's just a round thing, and in the middle of a table, me and Red, and I think a couple of other brothers, and the conversation just went, right? But then it rabbit trailed off. It was crazy, man. We're all over the place. And so I was like, you know what, that was good, but how about we let's see what we can do to fine tune it, and let's talk about things, as men, just different topics, that where we could be honest, that we could keep it real, right? But not get crazy. Let's bring the balance of Jesus into these conversations. And that's how it was birthed. And now we've had it for a while. We don't upload as much as I'd like to, two different guys doing it together. It's life, trying to keep the balance within our own lives, and then find the time where we could get together and really, really pray about inspiration on the different topics. And so we don't have as many episodes as we should, but whenever we do have one, it's a good time, man. And we always get some sort of good feedback about it. So yeah. So if you're listening out there, and if you want to have a couple of laughs, right, or if you want to listen in, and maybe you'd like to share it with someone else, look us up. Just keeping the balance.
Nice.
So,
Well, yeah. I mean, I've been a fan.
Well, you helped us a lot, little secret to everybody else. I was thinking about, I have no idea what I'm doing with this podcast, and I don't know how to formulate one. And so at the time, Pastor Dragoon had one, and I was like, he's right down the road. Why not reach out? And you were like willing to meet with me at a Panera. I think that's where we met, sat down, and you had listened to one of mine. And I was like, give me honest feedback, man, please. And you did. And it helped. That's been one of the things that's almost like one of the guidelines that we use whenever we do an episode. Hey, let's make sure that we don't rabbit trail, And so you definitely helped us with that big time. So appreciate you.
Yeah, I'll take all the credit when things go well. When it falls off a cliff, that was your thing.
Yeah, I had nothing to do with it.
That's right. Well, man, it's been cool to know you and to get to know you and your family since we've been here in Hampton Roads, and to see the progress of your life. And it's exciting to hear the big news coming out of the last conference.
Yeah.
So for those who weren't there in Jacksonville, North Carolina, Ernie and his wife were announced to go into Charlottesville, Virginia.
That's right.
Man, that's the place.
Yeah, Charlottesville, man. Yeah, it's awesome.
So I'm sure there's an interesting story that leads up to that.
Yeah.
But before we get there, why don't you introduce yourself, people who don't know you,
right,
and give us the short version of who you are, where you're serving the Lord.
Okay, so Ernie Peña, right? My wife Josie. We've been married. This November will be 20 years that we've been married, and we got four kids. My oldest is she's the only girl. She's 19, Annie, and then my son Angelo, 18. Then Adriel, he's 15, and the youngest is Victor, and he's 12. And we got saved right here in Norfolk, Virginia. We went ahead and we got invited out to a church. Well, that in itself is a miracle, the way that we ended up coming to the church. But that was in January of 2006 is when we came to a Wednesday night service, heard preaching for the first time. At least I did, and I was confronted with me, and saw how Jesus could help me. And I surrendered, man. I gave my life to Christ, and it's been a wild ride since, man. Yeah.
Praise God.
Yeah.
Well, so I hear every time I hear you talk, I hear a little Queens in there. You say coffee a little bit. So I'm guessing that this story is going to venture into New York.
Yeah, it'll venture there.
Is that where you grew up?
Yeah. So I was born and raised in Queens, New York.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I was born and raised in Queens, New York, and was raised began with my mother, my father, my older brother, and my little sister. And then at a young age, my father ended up leaving, and I was pretty much raised there in Queens, New York, in Astoria. Astoria is where my story begins there, and grew up in rough situation. It's not the best of. I mean, my mother and father are both from El Salvador, right? They migrated here. He was a merchant marine and ended up landing in New York, and then saw that he had potential to do work there. So, welder by trade, and he just took off. And so, we didn't live in the best of places. They really didn't know Spanish, or they only knew Spanish, didn't really know English. So we lived in the projects. That's where I was raised, and it's something that I love talking about when it comes to meeting someone from the streets, where it's like, hey, bro, I know what you're talking about, and that's where it all began for me. I don't know if you want me to dive into that a little
Oh
bit,
yeah,
or
let's dive in, man.
oh
We want
man.
to hear the whole story. So, what was life like growing up in the New York projects?
Well, I mean, like I said, life wasn't the sweetest, but we made the best of it, man. I mean, around that time, everybody was outside. There wasn't really much to do inside, right? And living in a small apartment, uh, and just looking for something to do out there. So me and my little sister would be running around the streets, man. And the projects there, I mean, obviously you could picture it, city buildings, right? 6 floors, 3 buildings attached with a quad in the middle, park that adjoins everything. It's all enclosed type sort of thing. And you just see a bunch of kids out there, a bunch of hoodlums just tearing it up, man, playing until late in the summer nights and getting into a lot of trouble. Well,
So,
where
you were one of those little hoodlums.
absolutely 100%. Absolutely, man. I took to it, man, big time. And so when my father split, my older brother was pretty much my role model. He was the one that I looked up to. He's the one that actually kept me in check because I was a wild one. Out of I mean, I was the middle child. He was the oldest, so he had a lot of responsibilities. Made him grow up a lot quicker. My little sister was the princess, so she never could do anything wrong. And then there was me, right?
Okay, I'm tracking.
So that's the way that I kind of that a lot of expectations were laid on me. But then he joined the Marine Corps and he left. And so right at a critical time where I was a teenager and I was looking for that role model. I was looking for that guidance. And my mother, in order to make ends meet, she was a nurse at a hospital, Goldwater Memorial Hospital on Roosevelt Island, and she took up double shifts. So that left no adult supervision with us.
You one of
And
those lock key? What do they call it? The key kids. There's a word for that. That was
the
me too.
that was you.
The one that carry the key to your door around your neck so you don't lose it.
Yeah. So well, you know what? My mother really didn't trust me with the keys, so she gave it to my sister. And so I was always out in the street, man, and anything that I could get into, I did get into. And so there was a group of teens out there that I would notice in front of the high schools and in the middle school, and a whole bunch of Latinos, a whole bunch of Spanish guys. And I'm like, man, these guys always have like a crowd around them. They've always got girls around them. It looks like they got money. So I was always curious by that. And so they were the Latin Kings, and they drew my attention, man. And the group of guys that I used to hang out with really weren't that type. They weren't the gangbanging type. They were pretty much kids from the projects. We'd play football together, and everybody just kind of grew up. I was always the youngest in the group, and so everybody else was always older than me. But then I started linking up with this other group, with these guys, and I saw them, saw what they did, and the way that it was, the appeal was, hey, we're a brotherhood, we look out for one another. And I was like, well, that's what I'm looking for, that's what I need. I need a brotherhood, and I already had good friends, but I decided to go that route, and so I dove into it head first. And I was a scrapper, and I used to enjoy that. I used to take pride in that, and so they saw me as, hey, that's another body that we could throw, at whatever the situation is. And that's where I began to build a street cred by just rolling with these guys, and then just getting into random scraps with different people, with different gang members, or just with different people, man. And so that became part of my persona. This is who Ernie is now,
So, did you have that bug for fighting and violence early on?
100%.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, even in middle school, early in middle school, we used to do slap boxing a lot. Slap boxing was a thing. You used to do it right before school started. They'd create a little circle. Everybody's waiting to get into school, and then somebody would slap somebody, and it's like, create a little. And that was kind of like the environment. That was the culture. Slap boxing, it was like nothing. And then that elevated to to actually boxing with boxing gloves on top of a rooftop and stuff like that. That was a norm. We would have matches in our living room. Mom wasn't home. It's like, come on over to the living room. Let's go ahead and throw down, and that would be the scene. So yeah, I had a knack for it, and I took to it. And it got control of me though. It was almost like I had this rage with inside that I really, really liked. My kids make fun of me because they go, "Dad, you could go from 0 to 100," because I said that one time, and they're like, "Dad, you remember? All right, now from 0 to 100," and I'm like, "No, that was back old Ernie. All right, that's not me anymore, right?" And so, but that was my nature, man. Where it was, I took pride in being able to switch it on and going from 0 to 100 and turning into a savage, and just I used to enjoy that. I almost had like a little bit of a bloodlust, and that could have gotten me into some serious issues if my mother hadn't sent me away.
Mm. Well, before we get to sent you away,
Yeah.
I think a reason why that feels good to so many young men, and that just embracing that rage, and because you feel like you're taking control of situations,
Yeah.
because you most likely coming from a situation where you feel totally out of control,
Yeah.
and maybe without even knowing it, right? And I identify with that because I had a similar story. And so, I can remember taking a baseball bat and going out in the backyard and just beating up a tree, and just like, it's not accomplishing anything, but it felt good.
But it felt good,
because I felt like I was in control.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So do you think that came from the fact that your dad was gone and kind of left you behind, or what do you think?
Yeah, well, there was definitely some serious rejection there, man, because I was trying to fill that role model, and since my brother wasn't there, I tried to fill it with these guys, and all of these guys were definitely not a good example. They would use anything to get by. Any way that you could find a shortcut, they would, and then if they do good, they'd capitalize, they'd celebrate it, and so definitely wasn't, and those became the guys that I began to follow or began to try to emulate. And then I see that almost like when a dog does a trick and they get a treat, and every single time that I would perform, that I would do something ruthless, it'd get celebrated. So that became, I'm like, okay, well then this is good. I like that feeling. I like the pat on the back. I like being recognized. At least they see me.
Right.
When in a city as big as New York, nobody really sees you. It's easy to get lost, and especially around when you're a teenager, you're still trying to figure out who you are. And at that time, it was almost like these guys celebrating me were feeding me into that ideology or that idea of it's a dog eat dog world, and you got to be the biggest dog. And so I said, "Yep," and I'm gonna be that.
How old were you when you got involved in there?
I want to say 14, 15. Yeah, well, 14. Yeah, so real young. And but what's funny is that looking back now, I definitely see that dad not being there played a huge part. If dad would have been there, dad was strict. He was a strict guy. And if he would have been there, no way he would have approved me hanging out with these guys, with these clowns. And he definitely would have put his foot down. And so him not being there, I think that was a way of me coping with that kind of rejection. Yeah, it's unfortunate, right? That you have to deal with that. It wasn't up until I was an adult that I realized that those were some deep scars created by that man, and I forgave him, and that felt great, but identifying the rejection part of it was very liberating as an adult. It's not something that you normally carry or can recognize in the moment.
For sure. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And when you're a teen and you're still how old were you when your dad took off?
Man, I want to say probably 8 or 9, probably 8 or 9. Yeah.
Yeah. So old enough to understand.
Oh yeah, he's not there.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, and you feel pain for that, and you kind of some kids take it on themselves. Like, did I do something wrong?
Mhm.
Usually that's the firstborn's
Yeah.
who,
Right? What I
um,
do wrong, right?
exactly. But yeah, so rough childhood. So what kind of trouble did you get into? Do you remember? Did you ever get any trouble with the law?
Yeah, I did. But this was back when I was already sent away and I was in California.
Oh, so
Yeah.
the story continues.
Man.
So California, mom says, moving with your auntie and uncle in Bel Air.
Yeah, kind of something like that. Yeah. No, so I was involved with so it was around the age of 16, yeah, 16, 17, right? That I had gotten to the point where I was selling drugs, right? And so I began to sell through a connection, began to sell for some Colombians. And so by this time, I had already tried weed. I mean, that was normal, right? Everybody had access to that, and that's what I was selling. But I had tried ecstasy. I had tried cocaine. I had those were the only three major drugs that I had tried aside from smoking. I was a regular smoker, and so I was selling weed, but I really didn't respect the guys that I was selling for. So I used it and partied, and then that caught up with me where the guys were looking for me, and then
So not only were you dealing, but you were a dishonest dealer.
oh yeah. Oh yeah. I was bad, man. It was I wasn't a very accountable dealer, I mean, a kid raised in the street, what do you expect, right? Is got all this cash in my hand. I got all these drugs, and it's like, oh, it's a party, bro, And but so yeah, my mother, she came up to me and she got tired of continual calls to the hospital. She's like, it's embarrassing. Every single time I get announced, through the intercom, Anna, your son's school's on the line. Please come to the. And then she's like, something's got to give. Listen, your older brother lives in California. He had joined the Marine Corps, so he was stationed there permanently. And she goes, I'll give you an option, because it's if I leave you here, something's gonna happen to you, and I'm not gonna bail you out. I'm not gonna bail you out. And so he's offering to take you in. I'll buy you a one way right now. And then so I saw that, and the like within me, I was so like rebellious, and I'd always like to clash back against her, go against the grain. And so I kind of looked at her and I was like, no, I'm going to stay here, And so she's like, no, listen, like, I'm not going to bail you out. I'm not going to come after you. And so I was like, okay, then you just want to get rid of me. Fine. Then I'll leave, so you have one less problem.
Okay, so you're like taking it personal and
Oh yeah,
playing a guilt trip on her.
100% took it personal, and I was like, fine, then I'm out of here. You don't want me. It's okay. It's all right. And so I left and flew into San Diego. And my brother and his wife at that time were trying to do the best to make me feel comfortable. But you just took a kid from the projects, real hood, and took him out of there, and you put him in sunny San Diego, right?
Oh, nice.
Yeah. And my whole style was completely different, clashed with any other Latino in San Diego, because I mean, I was used to, picture a little skinny kid with a do-rag and a New York fitted, baggy jeans, Timberland boots, and, just doesn't fit the same. You put another Spanish person next to me and it wasn't the same. You're looking at
the cholos,
the Dickies, the Converse, the Cortez, and it was like putting a target on my back. And
all of a sudden you were the different one.
I was the very different one. And that
were you still in school at this point?
I was still in high school, and I was in between grades, and I was in special ed, and I was put in a class where I was isolated from everybody else, right? And so that drew a lot of attention, but any attention that I got wasn't good. Like, I'm looking back and I'm like, okay, girls saw that I was different. That was an attention that at that time I was like, oh, this is awesome, but it really wasn't good. And then the guys, it was the wrong attention, man. And so my best friends were just black dudes because that's who I was able to relate with. That's who they saw somebody like, hey, man, you're different. You're from New York. People didn't even know me by my name. People called me New York.
Really?
That was my name in high school, was New York. Hey, New York. And I'm like, hey, what's up? But I got into a lot of fights that led to a lot of scraps, a lot of fights, and a lot of people challenging me, and little man syndrome. I got to prove who I am, and that got me into
So you're living with your older brother,
living with my older brother.
but he's in the Marines,
He's in the Marine Corps.
so he doesn't have the time to
No,
be
not at all.
your caretaker.
Nope, not at all. And then his wife is there. She works also.
Oh
And
wow! So
yeah.
there's a family aspect going on
Yeah,
here.
there's a family. Yeah.
She's not gonna clean up after you.
Nope. Mm-mm. They gave me my own room. They gave me the keys to the house. They showed me how to get to the high school and how to get back. And that's pretty much it. It's like, all right, bro. Hey, just do good, man. Yeah, right.
That's like sink or swim, you know?
Yeah.
So did you sink or swim?
I think I sank and I punched everything along the way down. No, it wasn't a good scene. I ended up actually linking up with a couple of neighbors, which were these are grown men, but these were grown men that used to be meth heads. And so these are the kind of guys that I hung out with whenever, because they lived in the neighborhood and I didn't know anywhere else to go. I definitely gave into chasing girls, completely neglected my studies, got to the point where I was where I was failing. That if I would have stayed in school, I would have graduated by the age of 20. So I was that far behind, and kept getting into fights, kept getting into scraps, and eventually school wasn't it for me. So one of my brother's coworkers ended up telling him about a program called Job Corps, which is federally funded.
Yeah,
A lot of people know about Job Corps. One of the things that I didn't know that it was federally funded. So it's like you have a lot of good opportunities there, but if you mess up there, you could do some serious time in jail, And so he told me about it, and I was like, no, I remember mom trying to take me to a Job Corps in Brooklyn, and it looked like a jail. There's like bars everywhere, and so I'm like, man, that's almost like the school that I was raised in. We had metal detectors, and so I'm like, no, I'm not. And he's like, well, let's go check it out. We went and checked it out, and it looked like a college campus, man. This thing was wide open. It was like you saw a football field, softball field, like dormitories, and I'm like, bro, this is nice. And he's like, all right, well, what do you think? And I'm like, yeah, let's do it. And that's where you live there. You live in Job Corps, and they give you a trade. They teach you a trade, right? And so I was like, okay, that's just fine. And they actually pay you to be there. Also, they give you somewhere to sleep. They feed you. They give you an allowance.
It's like military
Almost, you get to leave, but only on weekends, like overnight. And so I was like, okay, well then let's do it, and then I realized that a lot of folks, a lot of young kids that end up going there, some of them are by court order,
Okay.
and so it's
Now we know who we're dealing with.
so some of them are by court order, but others voluntarily go there, and end up trying to make a future of themselves. And so they put you in an orientation group, or in a group for orientation for about a month. And in this group, there might be like 20 or 25 other kids, And I say kids because it's 16,
Right.
And so 16, 17, 18. And my wife was in the same group that I was in.
Oh, well, now that starts to get interesting.
That's where Josie was. And
Okay, well, before we go further into the story,
Yeah.
The question that I always got to ask is,
go for
what
it.
kind of spiritual background did you have coming up to this? That you ever had any kind of religious or spiritual experiences?
You know what? I remember when I was like maybe 5 years old, 6 years old, my grandmother was an evangelical in El Salvador.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, that's different.
And so when my mother and father had me and my little sister, they had us in Queens, but they weren't settled in New York. They didn't really there was Queensbridge projects. There were other places that they were trying to bouncing around. They're like, nah, this isn't the place. Let's send them off to El Salvador until we're settled. So they shipped us off.
So you spent time down there?
Yeah. So my grandmother pretty much I thought she was my mom.
Wow.
Because at a very young age, that's who I saw. That's who took care of us. And so I remember her dragging us to church, right? And I remember Spanish, and they would worship. I remember singing some of the songs. And but then when my mother and father was settled in, they called for us back. and it was almost like I was ripped away from everything that I knew, which was my grandmother and my family
How
down
many
there.
years did you spend there?
So I remember going to school there. I remember being there as young as like, uh, from what I was told, from as early as 2, right? And I remember leaving there when I was in 2nd grade,
Oh,
1st grade.
wow. So that's a
That's a good amount of years.
big part of your life.
Yeah. And so that's what I remember was that, and going there. And then so I came to New York and I didn't know a lick of English at
Oh,
all.
wow.
So when they enrolled me into school, I was in ESL, right? The English learning, right? With all the other kids that didn't know any English. And I remember that time being like, oh man, I can't wait until I learn English. I'll never speak Spanish again, you know? But that was the only, because my mother wasn't religious at all, at all. My father either, you know? And so that was the only type of religiosity. I mean, aside from going to Catholic church my mother every now and then, Christmas, Easter, or whatever, would take us to the Catholic church. We'd go in. Those buildings scared the mess out of me because I'm little and I'm like, what the heck is this? Who's this guy? You know,
Well, you were never in a Catholic church
never in a
before
Catholic
that
church
because your
before that.
grandma was an
That's
evangelical.
right. She was a Christian. Yeah, man. And so, no Christianity at all. And then from my wife's side of the family, all Catholic, all traditional Catholic Mexicans. And so, yeah, that was my religious background.
Okay.
That's it.
So some people have religious experiences when they're high.
Ah,
Anything like that?
No, not at all. Not
Okay,
at
just
all.
party scene.
Just party scene. That's it. Things I don't even
You
want to
never
remember.
know. You just got to ask, you know?
Yeah.
So, okay, so you find yourself in the Job Corps.
Yeah.
And there's a pretty girl there. So
Yeah.
that's interesting.
Oh yeah.
All of a sudden you have some purpose.
Oh yeah. I had a lot of purpose because I had my eyes locked in. Me and all the other guys were like locked into her, and so I was like, well, she's in the same group as I am, but Josie was a good girl, and she's still, she's always been a good girl. She had the unfortunate, the time of her life was at a very young age. At the age of 13, I want to say, is when she lost her mother. And so when she lost her mother, her father is like, well, then there's no reason for me to be here. And he went back to Mexico.
Oh my gosh.
And then left her with her siblings, with her older sisters. And so one of her older sisters took her in, or I guess that they kind of casted lots. And for the younger siblings, she got stuck with this sister, and this sister kind of treated her like the Cinderella story, where it's like, you do the laundry, you sweep, you're gonna earn your keep over here. Very restrictive over her, didn't let her really do anything. And so Josie ended up graduating high school, and as soon as she did, she's like, I'm out of here. She left. And that's how she found the Job Corps program.
Also in California?
Also in San Diego. That's right. Yeah, the Job Corps out there is in Imperial Beach. And so that's where we were. And she ended up pursuing Job Corps because they also pay for your college. And so if you pick up a trade, and she wanted to be a kindergarten teacher. So she was there for that. She had goals. She knew she had a purpose. She knew why she was there. I had no idea.
You're just trying not to be on the street every day.
I'm just trying not to get into a fight with anybody.
Exactly.
All right, because that hasn't been working up until now.
So it was Cinderella. Now it's Lady in the Tramp.
That was Lady in the Tramp. Exactly. 100%, brother. 100%, man. I'm over here. I got fleas on me. I just look bad straight out the gate. And I remember we were in class, and I made a move, and I was like, oh, this works all the time. In San Diego, you use the New York accent, you overextend it a little bit. Girls like, ah. So I kind of pulled up next to her, and I'm like, hey, it's so embarrassing. I'm like, hey, and then she turns around, she's like, yeah, and I'm like, how you doing? And
It's like Joey.
Yo, bro, it was like a ghetto Joey, bro. It was so bad. And then she looks at me, and she looks at me up and down, and she's like, I got a man. And she turned her chair all the way. And I was like, I can't believe that just happened. I'm like, all right, I'm gonna slide out of this seat. and I'm gonna go away and I'm gonna disappear for a few hours, you know? And
Go lick the wounds.
yeah, and I was like, man, what the heck is wrong with this girl? You know, like I'm like, I don't know what her problem is, but I really liked her. And I was like, you know what? I'm gonna be friends with her friend, and I'm just gonna ignore her. You know, the hunt was on. You know, but through that, we became friends, and through that friendship, I realized that this girl is the type of girl that I don't have to be fake. I don't have to be tough. You know, she comes from a tough childhood. I didn't have to be that. And I began to let my guard down, which was something I never did with girls. And I began to let my guard down. I never did it with anybody. And she accepted me. And through that friendship, I began to fall in love. And then I tried to pursue her. And it took me like about a year to pretty much get with her, you know, and but we became really, really good friends. And I ended up falling for her hard. And that's where we began. You
How
know,
old were you?
18. And then we got pregnant at 19 and married at 19.
There you go.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so that means that there was at least some values in there.
Yeah.
That you wanted to marry her.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Yes, but it wasn't. My mother was the one that actually confronted me with that. When she came and visited San Diego, and I would bring Josie with me to my brother's house like on the weekend, because she has family, but she didn't have anybody to really go, you know. And I'm like, hey, why don't you come with me? And my older brother has always, like, the moment that he met her, he's like, man, there's something different about that girl, different from all the other crazy chicks that you brought around me, you know. So he's like, no, there's something different about her. And so he would invite her, hey, come, tell her to come. So one of those weekends, my mother and my little sister were visiting San Diego. So I've got my whole family there, and I let everybody know, hey, Josie's pregnant. And then so everybody celebrated, like, wow. And my mother's the only one with like a straight face, and she's like, so? And I'm like, so what? And she's like, what are you gonna do? And I'm like, I'm gonna work. And she's like, well, duh, but what else are you gonna do? Like, what do you? And then I'm like, well, what do you mean, Mom? She's like, come on. And she's like, don't be like your dad. And that's when it clicked.
Ooh.
And I'm like, oh, I need to make this legit. I need to make this real. And she's like, why don't you ask the girl to marry you? And I'm like, Mom, I don't have money for a ring. She's like, don't worry about that. Just do it. And I turned
But I'm
around.
not ready.
No, I turned around right there, and I kind of put her on the spot. And I proposed to her. And I was like, will you marry me? In front of everybody, in front of and she's looking at everybody all bright-eyed, and she's like, yeah. And I'm like, okay, cool, let's do it. And that weekend we got married in the city court in downtown San Diego.
Well,
Yeah.
it's not the Hollywood romance story,
man,
but
no.
somehow it's worked. We're 20 years down the road.
Yeah, that's right, man. That's
Well,
right.
praise God.
Yeah, glory to God, man.
So sounds like your relationship with Josie really shaped your life early on.
Oh yeah.
Put you on the right track.
It did. It did. It helped me a lot. It helped me because one of the things that I could say about her is that she didn't sugarcoat things. She would let me know when I was wrong. And one of the things that she always told me that she admired about me is that I would stand up to whatever the task is, no matter how difficult or wrong, that I would that I would stand up for justice, you know, that I would see injustice and I wouldn't be afraid to stand up to it. And she's like, I admire that about you, but I need to let you know when you're wrong. And that's one of the things that she always did. So yeah, she helped me grow, man. She helped me grow up.
So right there is a very interesting clue into the male ego.
Yeah. Right.
So for any female listeners that are out there, so there is a balance between letting a guy know how he can improve versus tearing a man down and making him feel worthless.
Oh yeah. Big
and
time.
So what I'm hearing from you, what Josie was able to do with you was to, on the one hand, she was able to lead you into a better life by telling you, man, I see that you care about injustice and you respond to that.
Yeah.
So, man, isn't it true that a woman can speak life into a man,
100%.
can create such an incredible opportunity for him to live well. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, 100%.
But you take that too far, and it becomes manipulation,
Right.
and then it's nagging, and then
Yeah.
I don't want to hear nothing.
That's right. Where the guy just shuts down. You know?
Exactly. So threading that needle is such an invaluable skill for a woman to have if she wants to see her husband change.
100%, you know, because you can't be afraid to speak up as a woman, right? To let a guy know, especially a guy that you love, right? You can't be afraid to speak, but at the same time, you don't want to come off as in, well, if it's this way, then I'm out of here, you know, or begin to run them. You know, you don't want to run your man. Don't do that, right? And so that's one of the things that she never really did. And but she did call me out whenever I did do something wrong, and it was obvious.
And you were willing to listen to that because you knew that she had your best intentions.
Yeah, that's right. It was a lot easier to receive it because I would look at her and be like, man, out of all the people, like you stuck by my side. And
she wasn't trying to hurt you.
No,
she wasn't trying to rip your or take advantage of you. Right.
Which is different from what I was used to.
Exactly. Yeah. And so the reason I'm saying that is because it's so important for women to understand the place that they have in the life of their man. Right.
Yeah. 100%.
It is because, you know, for a man who is, you know, who wants to have some bravado and present courage and masculinity to the world, and that's what gives him that sense of purpose.
Right.
For us to show ourselves vulnerable, even to our wives, is very, very difficult. Right.
100%.
And you're giving her your heart. Right. And you're giving her an opportunity to really crush it. And that's what a lot of unrighteous women will do. But to really see the kind of change, and we're talking about before Jesus here.
Yeah.
We're talking about outside of salvation. Yep. But what I'm hearing is the power of a good woman that she can have on her husband, and by extension, that she can have on a family and a society and a culture. Right. And so, you know, you don't want to lay the blame on, you know, just women, but if women of a culture would be righteous and would do well, then that raises the level of the entire culture.
No, it does. Yeah, that's right. You know, and having that gentle hand to be able to speak to a situation and bring life to it. You know, no, definitely, because us guys, we could try to do that, but not be as gentle. Right.
Correct.
It's a woman brings a different touch. All right, to different situations, a certain calm to different situations, and that's definitely she helped tame me, 100%, man. And ladies out there have that same power, you know. And I mean, especially if you're filled with the Spirit of God, just imagine what you could do, especially in the generation like today where there's so much confusion, where there's so many ladies who don't really know or are still trying to figure out, and you've got the world telling them, you know, that you know, and I hate to bring it up, but that transgender men are more of a value or more worth than a biological woman. And it's like a lot of young women are like, well, where do I fit into this, you know? And it's like, man, as a woman of God, if you have a relationship with Christ, you could bring so much guidance to these young ladies in this world that are coming up in a world with so much confusion, man, so much division. Yeah.
Wow. So, okay. So she had enough wisdom to begin helping you to shape your future. But I'm sure that there was also an influence that you had on her, hopefully.
Yeah. Yeah. Not for the better.
So you were pulling her down. She was pulling you up.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I was I made a lot of mistakes, man, as like especially in our relationship. I'm over here trying to win her over, and then I get all impatient, and I end up just keep maintaining the friendship, but still wanting to play around with different girls, you know, and that got me just it's funny because the moment that I stopped pursuing her and I began to get distracted with other women, that's when I got locked up. That's when I got into some serious trouble, and I ended up in jail.
Oh man.
And because I ended up in jail, and
is this before or after you got married?
This was before marriage. Like I was still trying to court. I was trying to court her. You know, I was trying to win her over. You know, and she was playing hardball. You know, and I was like, okay, I get that. You can play hardball. You know, and I'll entertain myself here. You know, and and entertaining myself here, I got involved with like a really, really crazy person, and that's where I ended up getting into some trouble where I ended up in jail, you know. And it's funny because after after I had gotten out of prison or gotten out of jail, I spent, I want to say, like a little bit over a month, I think, in prison, and it was real. It was real. I was 18, so I was in there with men that were doing real hard time, and I was like, man, I don't belong here. You know, like you could talk a tough talk, but then when you're in the situation, you really see like, man, this guy in the next cell is here for life. This other person ended up actually killing somebody, and it's like, and
So in a sense, it was almost good for you to see that.
it was reality that smacked me in the face. And my brother did everything. And my brother, man, I love him because he bent over backwards, get me out of jail, get a lawyer, everything. And I ended up getting out, but I ended up forfeiting my right to live and be a part of Job Corps, because you can't have a felony and be in there. And so I ended up temporarily moving back to New York. My mother's like, hey, why don't you come back over here? In the meantime that you're waiting on things to get processed to see if they'll let you back into Job Corps. But I had Josie, and I was like, man, at this time, me and her were still. She found out that I went to jail. She felt horrible, and I felt horrible, and so we made amends to our friendship, right? And I was like, hey, well, let's keep in contact, and we kept in contact the whole time. And then when I got news that I was able to come back to Job Corps and re-enroll and finish out my time there, I got a one way and I went straight back over there. She's the first person that I saw.
Okay.
She's the first person that I saw, and that's where our relationship really began to take place. And I was able to finish out. I got my GED while I was in Job Corps, and then she pushed me to get my high school diploma. So I got my high school diploma, and I picked up a trade. I picked up carpentry, and I was never really that good at it though.
It is an acquired skill.
I mean, I mean, it's a little shameful admitting that because I'm a Latino. It's like, come on, bro, it should be in your blood, right? Come on, dude, you come out the womb with
with a
with
tool belt.
2x4s and a tool belt. It's like I never was really, I didn't have that finesse that it takes for that kind of job. The hard work, I do it all day, and but that's where I ended up going. We finished out together. We graduated from Job Corps, and then we started our life, because that's shortly after I had graduated. That's when she got pregnant. We got married, and then we graduated from there and ended up living with one of her sisters.
Okay.
And
Okay.
and my daughter Annie was born in San Diego.
In the year
2004.
2004.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, those were good times.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
San Diego, huh? So okay. So here you are with young family,
Mm-hmm.
and you're trying to get on the right track. And so where does that take us next?
Man, so as I was trying to build a family, before, somewhere in the middle, well, when I had picked up carpentry, and I had gotten linked up with some guys that were there within the same carpentry group, the same trade, and one of them was a meth head, and he introduced me to meth.
Oh,
We used to hang out.
sounds like a real winner.
Yeah. And so that's where I began to smoke meth, and I got hooked.
Wow.
I got hooked bad. And by this time, and Annie was born. We were already married, and my first job at a Job Corps was working for a scaffolding company, which was really, really big out. Well, it was in its infancy stages out there. It's called American Scaffolding. Now they've actually made it to out here, and it's a pretty prominent scaffolding company now. But in its infancy stages, I worked for them, and me and this guy, this meth head, ended up getting a job there. We actually helped each other get a job there, and we're working for the union, and I was building scaffolding on skyscrapers, and then slowly moved into the shipyard to build scaffoldings on top of the ships and stuff. And I was struggling with this meth issue. Well, um living with her sister was short lived because it was only a matter of time before we outgrew. We were living in a garage, in the sister's garage. One of her brothers from San Bernardino, up in yeah, no, not in San Bernardino, up north in Modesto, California, northern Cali, said, "Hey, I heard that your husband does carpentry. Why don't you bring him up here? That's what I do. You guys could stay with us." So we went up there, and
Opportunity.
yeah, and not only that, but I got to cut the meth
Oh, the
habit.
relationship.
Yeah, and so I went. We relocated up there. We were living with him in his. We were living in his attic, and I was working for him. And he was a big time drinker. So then the next best thing, right? I needed something to replace the meth.
Okay.
I began to drink.
So this is like classic addictive personality syndrome.
Very addictive personality.
If it's not some one thing, it becomes another.
That's right. That's right, man. And then I began to see how he was, as a man, treated his family and treated his wife. And so I began to kind of like take
Like a
on
sponge.
some of those habits. And Josie's looking at it, she's like, "Nah, don't talk to me like that. Don't act," because he's very machismo, And she's like, "No, that's not how we do. That's not who you are." And I saw that, and I'm like, "Man, this isn't good." So while we were there, my mother reaches out. She always does, because this is her only grandchild, is my daughter. And she's like, "Why don't you move Josie and the baby to New York? Come and live with us. Come and live with us." But she's still living in the projects, the same building where I was, a troublemaker. And so I tell the wife, and I'm like, "Hey, listen, my mom says come over here and start working here. What do you think?" And she was already fed up with the whole living situation there and just the different habits that I had picked up and stuff. And she's like, "Yeah, let's do it." And I'm like, "Come on, let's go over there."
Ready for a change.
She was ready for a change, but she had never left California. She had never left family. And she was always talking to somebody within the family because they were all right there. She's one out of 14 brothers and sisters.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So it was a lot. The families, when they got together, and the first time meeting them, the first time meeting them, I was like, "Oh, you got a family. Like, this is a family. This is huge." And I'm like, it's just me, my older brother, my little sister, and I got a half brother that I barely see. And it's like, so taking her away from that, I didn't realize how much it would affect her. And but she's like, "Hey, okay, then let's go." And we went. And she was hurt in the hurt locker. She was missing home, homesick, big time. But thank God that we had the baby there. And then so we get there, and I begin to work as try to get a transfer for the local union, for the carpentry union. Get a freelance job doing some carpentry or whatever. Didn't really do too good at that. And I began to hang out with a lot of the old buddies that I used to know. Right. But not the gang members. These guys are different. These guys are different. These guys are kids from high school or from elementary school, but we used to hang out and smoke weed a lot, play video games a lot. Right. And then so I'd invite them over, and then that got old real quick. Man. And I remember one time when Josie had enough of seeing, her husband, father of her daughter, smoking weed and playing video games with the boys. And she was like, "Okay, enough is enough. I need everybody to leave." And I took that as an excuse me. Like, what do you think you're doing? And then the guys saw that, and they're like, "Oh, we got to go." They left.
Right.
And then now it's just me and her. And I'm like, I feel so disrespected. But I always gave her that freedom of, if I'm doing wrong, then let me know. And she let me know, but she let me know in front of the boys. So my ego was struck. And that's the first time ever that I try to put hands on her. And I just kind of grabbed her, and I was like, "Don't you ever," and she's just pushed me back. She's like, "Don't you ever put hands on me." And I just kind of snapped out of it because I instantly thought about my dad.
Wow.
Because even though I was young, I remember my older brother shoving us into one of the rooms as my father's closed fist and my mom, and you hear her screaming and yelling. You hear him screaming and yelling, trying to fight dad off of mom. And it was that's the reason why they split up.
Wow.
is because he was
Violence.
very abusive, you know? And the moment that I grabbed her and I threw her on the couch and she got up and she pushed back, it was almost like a flashback of my mom and dad. And I was just
I
kind
have
of,
become what I hated.
yes, 100%. And ever since that day, I vowed, I was like, I'll never do that again. I will never put hands on you ever again. And, um, so that it was that one instance. I don't know why that just jumped out at me, but it was really, really a turnkey for me on how to treat my wife or how to treat the woman that I love. You know, that's not one of the ways. And but I was also, because I was struck in my ego because she embarrassed me in front of my boys. You know, but I had it coming. I
For
mean,
sure.
I'm hanging out with the guys smoking weed and playing
Yeah,
video games. Like, what
acting
are you
like a
doing, bro?
stupid 15-year-old.
Yeah, you're supposed to be out there working, man. And so, fast forward, I run into this recruiter, and
Oh, here it comes. Here it comes.
I run into this old recruiter, and that I remember him from one of my high schools that I went to in New York. And she tried talking to me. And he's like, "Hey, I remember you," and I was like, "Yeah, you look familiar, you know." And he's like, "Hey, have you ever thought about the Navy?" And I'm like, "Absolutely not, man.
Not even one
No,
thought.
man. I do carpentry. I'm trying to get a job over here." And he's like, "Well, the Navy's got carpentry." And I'm like, No. I'm not gonna do it, man. And I'm like, "Listen, my older brother's a Marine. Okay, I'm not gonna join the Navy. If I'm gonna join something, it's got to be extreme. I got to do something to top him, you know." And he's like, "Well, have you ever heard of the Navy SEAL program?" And I was like, "What the heck is that?" You know? And then so he's like, "Hey, just stop by the office." I didn't tell my wife at all. I just kind of went with him to the office, showed me a video of these Navy SEALs doing these cool things, riding on the rib boat. And I was like, "All right, let's do it."
Serious?
Yeah. I was
Without
like,
even a
without
conversation.
even a conversation, I was like, "All right, let's do it. Sign me
I'm
up."
sure she was very happy about this.
And so I ended up taking like a pre-exam. I think I scored like a 36, which is like barely passing, right? I think failing is 35. Okay, so at that time 36, and I was like, "Yeah, that's what I got." And he's like, "All right, I don't know, all right, hey." He was just happy to have a body, right?
Right.
And so I go back home and I tell the wife, "Hey, I'm gonna join the Navy." And she's like, "What? What is that?" And then my mom's like, "What are you talking about?" "I'm joining the Navy." And then I'm like, "Hey," and you know what? My mom didn't protest it, and my wife was kind of like, "Okay, I guess this is what we're doing." And I'm like, "Yeah, this is what we're doing." And then so she kind of just went with it. She just went with the flow, man. Um,
Okay, well, I was seeing that go in a totally different direction. So, yeah, Josie is quite a girl.
no, because I mean, she really didn't know anything, and she just kind of she sucked it up, man, and she just stayed there. I had a younger sister that was is a year younger than me, and so she was pregnant at that time, I think, too. So her and my wife hung out a lot. And so I was like, "Well, I'm not leaving you by yourself. I'm leaving you with my sister. I'm leaving you with mom. You're in good hands, and I'll be back, you know, and I'll have a stable job." They started telling me how much money I'd be making, and "Oh, you're already married. You're gonna get this." I was like, "Okay, hey, let's just do it. I need to be able to provide, right?" And so I got shipped off to boot camp.
Well, so this is a big step up for you.
Yeah, I got shipped off to boot camp, and my ego was torn down, man, because I got to boot camp and I thought that I was the man, and I see all these other guys.
So it turns out you were not the man.
Oh no, I wasn't. No, I was a very bitter little man. Okay, and but I ended up signing up for what I wanted to do, and I was like, "Hey, I'm gonna serve my country, and I'm gonna do this extreme job, and I'm gonna do it to the best of my ability, you know." And because 9/11 struck a chord with me,
Oh,
you know,
okay.
and so my older brother was already enlisted. He was in the Marine Corps.
Is that why he joined up also?
No, so he joined prior to 9/11.
Okay.
And so I saw 9/11, and I saw him, and he was deployed at that time. And I'm in the projects with my friends, and I'm like, "Man, my brother's out there fighting this fight, and here I am over here getting high with you guys, you know." So for a short period, you know, it was very, like, I felt very patriotic. I saw when New York, for the first time ever, came together. and everybody was shoulder to shoulder, aside from when the ball drops in Times Square. This is different. This is like a very sobering time where even a whole bunch of hoodlums from the street kind of like were, hey, we need to come together,
Wow.
and
Yeah.
everybody grabbed their candle and show respect, right? That was
Anybody
really
under
big.
the age of 25 really cannot understand what life was like at that point.
No, it was
right.
it was insane. It was insane.
Well, the idea that we are vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
That was a new idea in the thought of an American mind.
It's like somebody could get to us.
Right.
How is that possible?
And then the reaction to that, which is we're going to show them who we really are.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And for that, whatever that was, that 6 months to a year after that happened, there was a true resolve.
Yeah.
And, people like you, right.
Yeah.
And people like me.
Yeah.
We were young enough to, that shaped a whole generation.
No, it did.
And the decisions that you made, unless that would have happened, maybe you wouldn't have had the thought to even join up or listen to that recruiter,
Yeah, no, that's right. No, I believe that too, man, because you're right. That was that was a time where it's like, man, you know what, we all freaked out because that's the first time I ever seen an F-18 aircraft or an F-14 at that time, the Tomcats, and they were flying over the city and you could feel the rumble from the jets in the project buildings. And I'm like, what? Everybody's freaking out like, man, are we at war right now? And it's like, yeah, we are at war, but different, right? And no, it did bring a resolve, it did bring a resolve. And so when I joined and I was going through boot camp, they went ahead and made the offer for those that wanted to try out for the Buds program. They would separate you from the rest of the division, and they would have you train with this old grouchy retired, or he wasn't retired, but this old grouchy SEAL. He had a voice like real raspy like this, right?
He'd been yelling at people for years.
Yes. And he's like, and he and the division guys, the RDCs, the instructors would try to tell us, all right, you're gonna last a day, because you got an attitude, you got a smart mouth, you're not gonna make it.
Okay, so wait, so this is boot camp or this is SEAL program? Okay,
no, this is boot camp. And then so I'm me and 4 other buddies from the division end up taking that challenge, and it's like, let's do it. And we did. And this guy put us through the ringer, running, push-ups, pull-ups, swimming, everything. We would get worked as hard as everybody else because everybody goes through physical training, but we just got a double dose. The good thing is that we got to eat twice as much. So
hey,
we got to. So that was actually, I look forward to that, man. I was like, hey, I'll do 200 push-ups if I get to eat another nutty bar, like his, and it was good. And I had ended up gaining a lot of weight. So at the end of it, I saw Josie. Now Josie just thinks that I joined the Navy just for the Navy. She had no idea.
Oh, she didn't know about the SEAL program.
She had no idea about that I was going to get shipped off to Coronado for Buds. She had no idea. And so graduation time comes. She brings my daughter. My mom is there. We're all having fun, celebrating. And then
another bomb drops.
And I didn't tell her, until she was, I forget when I actually told her. No, I didn't even tell her then. I was just like, hey, I've got to go to training, for I think another 6 months or so. I got to go to training. Well, where? Oh, I don't know where. Okay. All right. Well, just keep in touch.
Okay. I'm curious about this. So why do you think you were keeping that a secret from her? Were you protecting her?
No. So I don't know what it was. I was really bad at communicating, man. I was just I was really bad at communicating. And you know what? There might have been some embarrassment to that. There might have been some, well, I don't want to tell you just in case I didn't make it or just in case there's feedback of,
so it's fear of failure.
Why are you going to do that? Or why are you, or being swayed to not do something, right?
Okay, I know what that is.
So it's like, I'm just not going to say anything at all.
You don't want her to talk you out of it.
That's what, yeah.
I got it.
And then my mom was everywhere, and so my mom was within earshot of anything that I told my wife, so I didn't want to hear mom either. And so that was probably a part of it. So, yep, graduate, have a good time with them. They go back to New York. I go straight to Coronado.
So you go to Coronado straight out of boot camp.
Straight out of boot camp. Yeah.
Oh man. Well, I can't wait to hear this story.
Well,
Hold on.
okay.
Before we get there, we're going to say goodbye to our free listeners.
Oh, okay. Subscribe, y'all.
You got to subscribe. Well, we haven't even gotten to your salvation story yet,
No.
but we know you got saved eventually.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's coming. That's coming.
Oh man. But if you want to hear the rest of that, hit that subscribe button down below. And we didn't tell the audience this at the beginning, but you're a premium subscriber, yes?
I am, absolutely.
So
you know it.
Why don't you tell them why?
All right, listen, guys. So let me give you this inside scoop, man. All right, so I've been listening to the free version of this for a while, and it wasn't up until one of my brothers, I think it was Deontay Scott, was interviewed, and I ended up listening into it, and then I'm like, it cut off right at the good part, and I'm like, come on, man. So his pastor, Pastor Tejero, was the one that told him, hey, well, if you're a subscriber, you get to hear the rest of it. And that's where it gets good. So he became a subscriber. And I was like, man, let me do it. But here's the big thing. I have a heart for world evangelism, and so does Pastor Dragoon. And so any funds that go towards the subscription, those funds go towards world evangelism. So that to me is a no-brainer. I'm like, oh, I'll gladly give to that. Yeah, and then I get to hear the rest of these pretty cool stories too. You know, I mean, it's awesome because you get to connect with a lot of pioneer pastors, a lot of pastors that are out there within our fellowship on a different level. Man, you get to hear the realness of their story, you know, and the raw, and you could feel the authenticity of it. And so I'm like, you know what, this is a no-brainer. So if you're not a subscriber yet, hey, just do it. You know, you got nothing to lose, and world evangelism has everything to gain. Yeah.
Man, I couldn't have said it better myself. Yeah, so there'll be some links down below. By the way, we're going to put some links to the KTB podcast on there too.
Cool,
you can go check that out also. And we're going to say goodbye to our free subscribers, but thank you for listening. And for those of you who are premium subscribers, we'll be right back in just a second.